call to order. We called it to order ahead of the video service, so. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to welcome everyone to our meeting this evening. Trustee Hamilton sends her regrets, and we'll get started by approving the agenda for the meeting. Is there a motion, please, on page 2?
Mr. President, I move that the Board of Education approve the agenda as printed.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion passes, and we'll move forward with our agenda as printed and start where we always do with the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Randy. We have several reports that we'll be presenting to the board tonight, and they'll all take a little bit of time. So just be forewarned on that one. 2 of them under the superintendent's report, and 1 is under board education. So the first is our audit presentation, and this serves as the board's external monitoring report. You get 2 reports on this policy, and 1 is external, 1 is internal. So this is the external one and is also our audit. So Paula Johnson is here to introduce that.
Good evening, Board of Education and Superintendent Beeling. Tonight in our financial report is something a little bit different. It's our annual audit presentation. The Finance Committee did meet prior to the board meeting this evening to go over the highlights of the June 30th, 2024 audit. And with us tonight to present on the June 30th, 2024 audit is Principal Kim Lindsay from Raymond. So I'm going to turn it over to Kim, and he's going to go over the highlights for you.
Good evening, board. Here to go through the audit report. As Paula said, we met with the Finance Committee earlier. She's given you a kind of a little dissertation on the year as well in your board information. I've got about 8 slides to run through, so I'm trying to take too much of your time. But I do want to preface my comments with thanking Paula and her team, Sammy and the others in the office for another good financial audit. So team is always prepared. It's a big undertaking to get through this process, which culminated on Friday with all the reports around the state being sent up to the Department of Education. So I'm going to run through these slides. Feel free to ask any questions as we run along. So first of all, the district did receive an unmodified or a clean audit opinion, which is the highest form of assurance we can give you on your financial statements. I'm happy to report there were no findings or reportable conditions that are brought out specifically in the report. So as a board, you should be happy about that as well. You do, as a district, receive federal funding in the amounts that require a separate audit of those federal funds. So this year, for the federal audit, the child nutrition cluster was selected for testing. So that was about 1/3 of all total expenditures for federal programs this last year. The previous few years, you've been seeing COVID funds being tested. Those have kind of fallen off now. We spent the last of those in fiscal year 24, and they also became de-risked by the federal government because we've been dealing with them for the last 4 or 5 years. You're also required, because you do have voter-approved construction bonds, and you have a voter-approved sinking fund, millage associated with that, to also have another set of procedures applied to those funds required by the Department of Treasury. And I'm happy to note that you also complied in all respects with those rules and regulations. For those of you who don't like to dive through a 150-page report, there are, in this very beginning of the report, this section called Management Discussion and Analysis. There are about 11 or 12 pages of narrative information with financial information, some comparative stuff. It kind of lays out what happened during the year. Did things go well? Did they go poorly? How do we compare? How did things go? So that's a nice section to just pull out if you want to just look at a few pages of the report to get a flavor. We have, over the last several years, been reporting some pretty good sized numbers on the entity-wide financial statements at the very beginning of the report. So the district is required to report its share of the ORS pension liability, the unfunded pension liability, for Portage Schools, that was just shy of $175 million this year. Last year it was $206 million. Why does it swing so much? Well, investment returns were really good this last year, so the pension liability fell. The OPEB side of things, so the healthcare portion of the retiree healthcare plan, so those people who have been in the system for a while, they have the assurance of healthcare being paid for by the system when they retire. Newer hires, not so much, unless they adopt a few things. So this year, that plan actually shows an overfunding. So the district has a $3 million asset on its books this last year as compared to $11.7 million liability last year. The overall result of those really large numbers is the very first financial statement actually shows a deficit net position at the government-wide level of $37.6 million, which is typical of all K-12 schools around the state because of these two numbers. I just will point out to the board that OPEB net asset number, that's what caused all of the ruckus in the budget process on the last 2 days of June. So because there was an asset there, I don't want to go into it, but there was a play made by the legislature to move money around. You didn't get a foundation allowance, you're going to get a decrease in your retirement rate for this next year, which we haven't seen yet because we haven't had the first payment on that plan. Hopefully November we see that. Also still talking about that government-wide data, the overall change in net position or equity at the government-wide level was a $27.1 million increase, once again mainly because of those valuation changes in the retirement plan. Overall revenues across the district, $159 million as compared to about $153 million last year. Main differences there was we did have a pretty substantial per pupil increase last year, and also all these categoricals that are just coming out of the woodwork now from the state. So, and then you also had pretty good sized property tax increase from property values increasing across the district. Expenses, relatively the same year over year, but our expenses went up. Yeah, they did, but because of this pension plan change, though that change actually runs through the expenses on the government-wide level, so you don't see a dramatic switch there. Looking at the fund level stuff, those numbers are relatively small. You'll see across the top of the page a few funds specifically identified. Those are considered to be major funds in the accounting jargon. Basically because of their magnitude, they're shown separately. In that non-major fund category are things like the food service operation, student activities, some older debt, and some older capital project stuff is out there sitting in those funds. Just kind of looking at a couple of numbers here. Balance sheet wise, the general fund ended the year with just over $44.3 million of assets, mainly money in the bank, money that's been invested, and then also receivables from the big one, July and August state aid payments come in after the year, but they go back to the fiscal year June. And then also reimbursements on federal grants that are in there. Liabilities of about $17 million. Big components there are accrued wages for our teachers who are paid over the summer, but wages were earned during the school year, along with their benefits. And then there was a pretty good chunk of change in there for state grant funds received, but not yet spent, so they're considered to be unearned. They're sitting in that liability number. Fund balance in the general fund at the end of the year, just north of $27 million, of which $21 million is unassigned or available for the board to appropriate. The two capital projects funds, the 2021, that's the one we've been spending on pretty steadily through fiscal year 24. We'll be spending a big chunk in fiscal year 25. But there's still about $23.5 million of equity left at the end of the year. The 2023 Capital Projects Fund, we actually issued those bonds right at the very end of fiscal year 23. So that project is not, we've actually not even started spending the money yet in fiscal year 24. Looking at revenues and expense, general fund, just shy of $126 million of revenue. Expenditures of about $121. So a net increase to the fund balance in the general fund of about $4.8 million this last year. Been seeing that pretty typical around the state. As the pandemic funds are finally now coming to an end, we're still seeing some increases generally in the general fund's equity. Capital projects there, in the middle, the 21 capital projects, you can see we spent $25.3 million of those this year. So an overall use of about $23 million in fiscal year '24. The revenue there is mainly investment earnings. A couple of charts looking at the general fund specifically. The first one on revenues, where does our money come from? For Portage, about 72% of every dollar of revenue is from the state of Michigan, both foundation allowance and then all that categorical type stuff. About 24% locally, majority of that is property taxes. So property taxes on non-homesteads, so not your homes, but all the businesses around. And also a good chunk of investment earnings this last year. About 4% comes from federal dollars. Pretty small piece of the pie for a district this size, but due to your at-risk population, you get lesser in some of the main federal programs like Title I. On the expenditure side of things, as board, I'm always interested in the blue piece of the pie being as big as possible. So instruction means dollars spent directly in the classrooms. So teachers, paras, all their wages, bennies, classroom supplies, technology, all that kind of stuff. So anytime we're at 60% or more, that's a good thing. Support services at about 37%, that's kind of everything else. Admin, operations and maintenance, transportation, everything else. Everybody who's not in the classroom. So those are good ratios. Looking at general fund budget results, you had anticipated about $121 million in that final budget. Remember, you amend your budget mid-year and then again at end of year, and then you adopt the original budget way back. You did that back in June of '23. Actual revenues were about $126 million, so you came in about $2.2 million short on revenues. That's mainly having to do with state grants received, but not spent at year end. So they're not in revenue, they're sitting on that balance sheet as unearned. Expenditures, you had budgeted in that final budget about $127 million. Actually spent about $121, so just shy of $6 million underspent on the expenditure budget. The net result is you're actually about $3.8 million ahead of where you thought that change in fund balance would be at end of year. So a positive variance. A couple of other informational items. I told the Finance Committee before, this community has been very supportive in passing bond issuances. With the bond issuances comes debt. So at the end of the year, about $110 million of bond principal and installment debt remains. You retired just shy of $12 million this last year. Didn't issue any new debt in '24. You'll be issuing a new series on the 2017, I think it's Series 3, this next year, as you move into the next phase of capital projects. Capital assets at the end of the year, net of depreciation, about $254 million. Almost $28 million added to that this year for projects going on around the district. Within the bond funds, within the sinking fund, and also you had some pretty significant technology expenditures this last year. This was kind of the end for pandemic relief. So all the ESSERs, 1, 2, 3, all the stuff that came before it in the opening years is now pretty much gone. There was $3.2 million of that absorbed in this current year. And as you know, board, there was no foundation allowance increase for '25. We're going to see that hopefully in the permanent reduction in our retirement rate. So we'll see when that starts coming. It will help. It'll be different with cash flow. But your budget that you adopted back in June, before you knew this was happening, is going to change dramatically as far as how the overall net picture probably won't change dramatically, but how things are allocated, like retirement expense, will be less now. So you'll see those changes when you get that first amended budget. Everybody in the state is doing the same thing, kind of reeling, where are we at, what's happening. We haven't seen any of the new money yet. The October payment was like 3 lines of information. Normally, it's 2 pages of information, so hopefully we see some more of that in November. But overall, really strong audit. District remains in really good financial health. And I would take any questions you might have.
Well, I certainly have a comment if there are no questions. It's the chair of the committee, and it's not to be taken for granted, but we do get used to these pristine reports from Paula and Sandy and her team. We appreciate that. But to amplify a little bit more on what you had said during the session today was the wonderful shape that we are in as far as succession planning, for the unknown things that could happen, that the processes are in outstanding shape, so that if Paula and her team had to step away for whatever reason, everything's in place for others to pick up the ball. Am I saying that about?
Yeah, and we're seeing a significant talent strain when it comes to school finance around the state. Not a ton of people coming into the profession, and we're getting a lot of people retiring out of the profession. So it's causing some hiccups kind of around the spaces. And I think we're doing a nice job in the finance office of making sure people are cross-trained, that we're learning each other's jobs, we're able to step in, even if somebody were to go down sick for a while. It's just a good place to be in. Not every district has that kind of strength in the central office, so you should be happy about that, and they do great work, and they should be commended.
I was going to comment also, Paula, Sammy, your team, you have my admiration for having all those numbers kept so amazingly organized and doing so well with it. Not just admiration, but thanks. My eyes go googly when it comes to that many numbers in a row, and it takes me some time to straighten them out, and you guys just seem to have a gift. Thank you.
Thank you, board. Appreciate you.
Kim, I just wanted to say we always appreciate your presentations. You make it so understandable for the non-financial person, and appreciate all the work that went into this. And thank you for being here tonight, and thank you to Paul and Sammy and the entire district for taking care of our finance as well. We sure appreciate it. That's one thing we don't have to worry about here. That's a good thing.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, the next report is a bond project update, and this one will primarily focus on our Woodland School, and Johnny Edwards and his team will do the presentation on that. Johnny?
Thank you, Superintendent Lang. Tonight, we're just going to jump into the Woodland presentation. I wanted to share with the board that a few weeks ago, we had our community gallery walk for the Woodland design. The first hour was kind of like a private piece only just for the staff, and the staff were able to go through all of the images that you'll see tonight. And then afterwards, we had a community open forum gallery walk, which was very engaging. We met many of the neighbors who do not have children at the school at the current moment, formerly had children in the school, neighbors who've lived in the community for, in some cases, well over 3 decades. Even bumped into a former student who had the original groundbreaking ceremony program, and he pointed himself out in the booklet, which was really nice. As the board know, and for our community, we've partnered with Tower Pinkster and Fielding International for our architectural firm, and OAK for our construction management firm. Tonight, Danielle is going to lead most of the presentation. I'm going to take the first couple of slides just as a reminder. She's been our lead on the design element of this. You should have a copy of the presentation. Just for redundancy, we didn't include every single slide in your handout, but they are all on the board. Towards the end of the presentation, Tom Stanek, who's the director of the Kalamazoo branch for OAK, will take the last couple of slides. Again, this is a collective effort, including from assistance from our owner's rep with Plant Moran. So just a reminder, we have 8 guiding principles for this work. These principles has served as a foundation for all of our work related to the design as well as the construction. And these 8 guiding principles remain unchanged. What I really like and appreciate about this is this keeps us focused and on track for all the work that we do. Now that we're in this 3rd building and we've had an opportunity to work collaboratively over the first 2 schools, then I would say that the Woodlands process has gone much more smoothly. And I think it's because we've gotten better with our work. So I'm going to turn it over to Danielle to walk us through some of the design principles and how we got here. There's a very few modifications that have been made since our June presentation. But now that we're in what we call the construction document phase, we wanted to share this timeline of or evolution of the design thus far.
Thank you. So just as a reminder, these are the design drivers that we developed specifically for Woodland, in addition to having the guiding principles that we have applied to every school that we've worked on in the district. These were very specific to Woodland and are very present in our design. A couple that I'll call out, the sensory and calm retreats, really making sure that we have spaces for students throughout the building where they can have a quiet moment, where they can go with a teacher or a tutor and have that kind of quieter space, in addition having common spaces where a larger group can gather and having kind of multiple different types of sensory spaces. The indoor-outdoor connection was also something that they really highlighted, having the access to the woods that are behind the school and really wanting that to be an equitable access for all grade levels, 2nd or 1st floor, to be able to get out into that space, and then also making sure that it was accessible for every student regardless of ability. And then the last being really thinking about safety and security and how we could create kind of different levels of security as you go into the building, really wanting this to be a really warm and welcoming environment that really fits the needs of this community. And while it has the same pieces as Central and Haverhill, it looks very different and very specific to Woodland. So this is kind of where we've been and where we're going. When we last met with you, we were just starting into the design development phase, and we have now just completed the construction document phase, meaning that the design is in a really, really good spot. We have a little bit more detail to share with you today in some of the images. And just kind of thinking about the number of engagements we've gotten to have with your community. We've had 31 total, including meetings with leadership, the community gallery walk that Johnny mentioned, in addition to working sessions with just the teachers and with the students. We've gotten to hear feedback all throughout the process and have gotten really great feedback throughout the design process. So this is looking at the overall site plan. To the north, we have our main entry and our parent drop-off. There's also an entry plaza next to it, as you'll see, with some seating elements there and some space actually for the library and art classes to be able to have some outdoor learning opportunities as well in that main entry space. We also have our bus loop that's right near our gym entry there on the west, and some staff parking a little bit farther down. In the back of the building, we have a separate service entry and then another entry that's specifically for the cafe and for students who might be going from lunch out into recess, with also a little bit of an outdoor dining and community gathering space in the back there as well. And then the nature court that has been really developed since we last got to share this project with you. That is our main outdoor play and learning environment that's been really crafted specifically for Woodland. And each grade level has access to that space, either from their commons or through another kind of egress door in the building. We really want that to be a space that they're able to use as much of the year as possible, given Michigan weather. So this is a view of the building. If you're kind of turned from the floor plan that we were just looking at the front of the building, we heard a lot during our community engagements that there was this concern about having a 2-story building in a very residential area, going from the single-story building that's there now. And so the whole front section of the building is single-story. It's really meant to be really student scale. It's meant to really feel like it's part of the community. And the only portion of the building that is 2 stories is that kind of back section where we do have 2 levels of classroom spaces. And the gym is also a 2-story block.
What you'll kind of see with the material there is bringing that darker tone to the bottom with, we have some of our materials here as well. Your eyes kind of get brought down a little bit. It brings that scale of the gym block down that, and we heard very positive feedback with the community about what the scale of this building really feels like. And this is kind of looking at the back of the building, again, kind of seeing it, that nature court, that central kind of section is where our school heart is, and then having that two-story living community, as I mentioned, towards the south.
While you're on this slide, the existing pedestrian connection, does it currently terminate about on that property, or is it pass on, continue on through?
It might go a little bit farther, but we are maintaining that pedestrian connection and have incorporated it into the design. So our color scheme, this is for both the interior and the exterior. This was developed through feedback that we received from teachers and from students in particular. The tones that they were looking for, we did a really fun exercise with them early in the process, and these are the same color tones that we've had really since the beginning that have really stayed consistent as we've been developing the design. And for our material palette, we've just been able to get into a little bit more detail. We have this really wonderful gradient pattern in our main learning community spaces. You'll see here these kind of 3 different tones and textures of kind of the more neutral brick. That's going to be your main color scheme for the learning community wings, and you'll have a gradient where it's darker at the top and gets lighter as you move to the bottom. And then these 3 tones here, that's the gym block where you have that really beautiful glazed brick at the bottom and then gets a little bit lighter as you move to the top. And then we have a couple specialty spaces, the main entry and library, the back outdoor cafe area, and then the school heart have this middle wood look material. That's really going to add this really nice natural tone and warmth to the exterior of the building at some of those main entry points. So this is a view if you're currently standing on Woodland Drive approaching the new building, kind of in around where the bus loop is or walking from the community. And again, kind of as we're starting to kind of move up towards the building, this block here that's on the side by the gym is our admin block. The receptionist will be able to see out into where the students are getting dropped off, kind of have that passive supervision and the direct connection to a secure vestibule inside the building. Again, thinking about those kind of passive safety measures. This is the main entry. We've been able to really develop this wood canopy structure with kind of a clear top to it because we are on the north side of the building. We want that natural light to be able to filter through, but we also want that weather protection as well when students are waiting for their parents at the end of the day. We also have our library where you kind of see the Woodland Elementary logo in behind there and getting the opportunities to really bring light into that space in a really fun way, kind of mixed in with the wood look metal panel texture. And then also looking at our main entry plaza here, having different spaces for students to sit, for parents to come and wait for students. We know that's a really big part of this community, as parents really getting to know one another while they're waiting for their student to be let out of school and wanting there to be a space for that at the front of this building. This is back kind of, now we've kind of turned, we're by where the bus loop would drop off, by where the entry is for the gym. And getting to kind of see what that gym block material looks like as well. This is back in the outdoor gathering area, so we have a space where you'd be able to have some picnic benches and seating similar to the other 2 buildings, and having access again straight from lunch, let's say, out and to be able to go straight to recess, having that outdoor access from that space. This is the main kind of 2-story learning community block, again, kind of looking at the material of having that like very slight gradient as you go from the top to bottom of the building with the brick textures and tones. And then having kind of a bit of a pop of color where we have the learning commons. For this 2-story block, we have this bluer brick that is over here. And then on the other side where we have our single-story K1 block, we have this kind of more purpley toned brick selection at the learning commons. This is the nature courtyard. I'm insanely excited about this space. We've gotten to work with an incredible team at Tower Pinkster to really imagine all the different activities that can happen. What you don't even get to see in this image is all the playground equipment that's been thought through, thinking about how we are going to accommodate for students of multiple abilities. Really wanting this to be accessible but really fun, and having natural elements like the rocks and the tree stumps and things that you have, natural play elements mixed in with the playground equipment as well. And again, having access from the learning commons, from some of the stairwells to really be able to bring students into that space throughout the day really seamlessly. And just again, an overview of our material selection. We have some samples over here if you'd like to see as well. They remain mostly unchanged since our last opportunity to share with you, but just wanting to get a chance to show you those samples in person. And just again, an overview of the floor plan. Again, we've gotten so much wonderful feedback from the community early on in having Central and Haverhill. We didn't have to make too many crazy changes throughout the design process. We were really able to kind of nail down the design on it earlier on in the process. So it looks very similar to what we were able to share with you last time. We were able to make some modifications to the heart, and we'll share an image with that with you in a moment, just to continue to make that space even better for the students of this community. And again, this is one of the spaces that really distinguishes Woodland from Central and Haverhill, being accessible, having it be more of a sunken living room than kind of a grand gathering stair that really fits. And this is the second floor again, just grades levels 4 and 5, but having that connection to the heart in the main part of the building, and then having access outside through the 2 stairwells, as well as having an upper heart and flex studio space on the second floor as well. So this is a view of the heart space. You can kind of see a little bit of the plans of what it was like at schematic design and design development. And just we wanted to highlight, we shared this with the community as well for all the spaces we shared, just some of the feedback that we'd heard throughout our work and how that really did have an impact on the design. Thinking about that vertical connection to the second floor, having the idea of a sunken living room, something that was really accessible and inclusive. The little cubbies you see that are tucked back underneath the stair. You can see a little bit better here. Those cubbies, we made sure that one of them was also accessible at ground level while the other 2 are a little bit more elevated. So you still have those cozy nooks, but we're able to really meet the needs of every student in this space and have a really incredible zone that we're really excited to see. And then one other space we wanted to share from the interior of the building is the Learning Commons. This is going to be a really wonderful space. It can hold a full class of students. It connects to all of the different rooms, and we've really thought about how you would have passive supervision from the learning studios into that commons, and really maximizing the amount of kind of transparency that we have into that Learning Commons. Each community also has a mudroom for student belongings, to have a neat way for that all to get organized, separate from the learning spaces. And it's just going to be a really exciting environment. Again, a view of what that space is going to look like. So all 3 studios here open up into this commons. You don't have to walk through them to get to another community, which was also something that was asked for. And then each community has access to a small group room as well.
You talk about the ceiling in that area?
Yes, it is a kind of perforated metal panel. I wish our interior design team was here to talk about it, because they've put so much love and attention into all of these different interior details. It has a lot of really great acoustical properties, while also adding kind of a fun, whimsical element to kind of go with our enchanted forest theme of the building.
I just want to highlight one other component. This is what I would call lessons learned. So in this example of our Learning Commons, there are sticky notes that characterize what we heard. And then when you look at the bottom right-hand corner, it shows where the design was back in February in schematic design and where it evolved to in August in design development. So as our staff members were able to go through the design iteration, it's just a little small side-by-side comparison for they can see specifically how what we heard, their input, how it incorporates into the final design. And that's also shown here at this example for the heart. You can see how the heart evolved over time from February to August. And honestly, full credit also goes to Dr. Jensenius, because she kind of started with this concept of we need to make sure that we find a way for people to see the changes, because if we only show them the final version, they kind of forget where we started. So this is our way of helping our staff and community see how their input evolved in the design changes. All right, I'll turn it over to Tom for the last 2 slides.
All right. Excuse me. So we're getting excited to start the next phase after the construction documents are completed here with a beautiful design they have. But really kind of wanted to take one step back. This was a slide that Plant Moran put together. And this was based on some information a couple years ago where we all know that we all realized what the construction market changed dramatically on us once the bond was approved here. And as you can kindly see, that the jump from August to where we're at has gone up significantly. And so I just wanted to understand that, and the district decided to make sure that that programming was not sacrificed as we go forward here. And Plant Moran then went ahead and updated the last year and a half here, or last year, and you can see that things are starting to kind of align now, and what we would see more of a normal increase on a year-by-year inflation. So where we started back when we started discussions about the bond back in 2019, the bond projection was roughly at about $28.6 million. And then again, everything happened there. And in January 24, then when we put together the SD budgets for the project, we were at just under $40 million there. And again, we have to do an SD budget, a DD budget, and a CD budget. And we're happy to share that based on the last design, the design development, those costs actually have decreased a little bit there, as you can see the numbers there. So we're anticipating a good bid market as we go forward here in the next couple months there. And the exciting part from a starting standpoint, we're planning on starting the demolition with the abatement in the summer of 2025, as soon as school allows us to get out and start that process. We'll start the new construction immediately after the abatement is completed there. And the students are going to then end up moving into Haverhill at the end of the summer there. And there's been a lot of planning going on with Plant Moran and Tower Pinkster and the district, and trying to make sure that that all is orchestrated correctly. So there's been a lot of time spent on that. And then the plan is to have Woodland complete so that the new students and staff can move in August of '27. So that's kind of a general quick timeline of where things are at. We're excited to be involved with it. So there's going to be a lot of activity going on in the campuses here this next summer.
That concludes our slides. Are there any questions of the board that we can answer for you all?
It's not a question, but a comment. I mentioned this at the gallery walk, but I want to say that I so appreciate design driver number 3 being those quiet spaces. That as you were talking about equity and inclusion, you did not just look at the visible disabilities, which are important to take into account completely 100%, but you also looked at those invisible disabilities, the neurodiverse who function in those spaces mentally. And thank you very much as a mom of students, of children who are on the spectrum. And as a teacher of the students who are on the spectrum, I appreciate that. Thank you for taking that into account and designing around it.
Thank you for all the good work. This is going to be quite something. So thank you very, very much.
All right. No other questions, we'll move on
Let's do it.
to board education. So Dr. Pasco is going to lead the presentation on Global Ends Policy 1.1. Before he gets started, I just want to make sure that just talk a little bit about the sequencing. You know, the board made revisions to Ends Policy 1.1 last spring, changed some language to be more focused on the English language arts and math achievement by our students. Which then caused us to create some new interpretations which are included in the report on how we've interpreted your language. We've created some new comparator schools at each of the levels, and similar to the concept that we talked about last spring when we first presented these ideas to the board. There's more information in this report than you'll normally get because we want to lay the groundwork for some of the comparative schools and the criteria used for selecting those, and the data that we'll be using. There's also a few changes in the accountability measures, especially from current reporting to what will follow in the future. And I hope that you find that what we've done aligns with what your intent was through your policy language. I guess that's the big thing that we hope to get out of from you if there's anything there. Also, in the past, we've presented this report over a 4-month period. There was an elementary, middle school, high school, and then a cumulative summary report. We've combined high school and middle school into one report, which you'll be receiving tonight. Next month, you'll get elementary, and then a summative report in January. So with that said, and without duplicating anything else Dr. Pascal might get into, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thanks Superintendent Beeling, and good evening trustees. Tonight I'll present, as Mark said, a new approach to interpreting MR11. We're looking at each PPS school's top 10 similar schools across the state in an effort to more accurately determine where our buildings fall. So all the information that you see this evening in tonight's presentation is directly pulled from my school data. With criteria based on total enrollment, we'll look at percent of economically disadvantaged. There's some demographic data in that criteria. And then we capped 125% of our highest schools' total per pupil expenditure, meaning we are staying within a similar funding structure for all of our similar schools groups. So you've heard of the term hold harmless. There's some districts in the state that get significantly more funding than, say, some of our schools, and we purposely left them off as not a true comparator. So there was a few outliers that we needed to eliminate. So pretty much everyone is being funded in a similar fashion. And you could see those for both high school and middle school in figures 9 and 18 in your packet. It's a pretty big packet this time around. If you want to look at the total building per pupil expenditures for the similar schools, that's where you'll find that information. So this approach, as Superintendent Beeling says, it'll eliminate the grouping of all schools into one average. It's kind of what we did before in prior reports, and should provide each school a true apples-to-apples comparison to alike schools that have similar makeup. So tonight we're going to focus on high school, and we're also going to add middle school. So it's more of a secondary lens tonight, and then we'll be back in December with Dr. Jinsenius and myself to look at some of the elementary data. And so this approach also includes how our schools compare to others in the K-RESA area in the county. So it's also kind of a new approach. We're reporting on the same 3 areas with the addition of K-RESA comparisons as well as true comparators in the state for the proficiency measures. So just to take a step back at what we're looking at, the percent proficient, simply looking at one testing cycle for tonight's purposes will be spring of 24 data cycle. Percent proficient improvement, that's where we look at current scores compared to the 3 previous years' average to see if we're improving over the past essentially. And then growth is the 3rd category, is determined by the percent of PPS students with a student growth percentile, or you'll hear me use the word or term SGP, of at least 30. So my school data defines average growth as SGPs from 30 to 69, and above average growth with SGPs from 70 to 99. We'll get into that during the growth slides of the presentation. So here's just a kind of a review of the criteria and the weights that we're looking at moving forward for MR11s. You'll see that at the top compared to what we did in the past. So we've broken that 100% of the calculation down a little bit more. So you'll see total enrollments now weighted at 35%. We have economically disadvantaged at 40%. You'll see there's a certain percentage for some race and ethnicity groups, as well as students with disabilities or that receive specialized services. And then again, taking into consideration the PPE at each level, particularly for the hold harmless communities out there in the state. Compared to what we used to do, particularly for the last decade or so, it was really just a 50-50 split. Total enrollment carrying a weight of 50% to comprise our group and 50% for economically disadvantaged, but also being mindful of low minority enrollment, and then the high foundation allowances were removed from consideration in the past. So you can kind of see the different approach that we're taking for these reports moving forward. All right, so we'll get into it. We'll start with high school. You have a list of similar schools that determine where both PN and PC land based on the criteria, and that's in your packet in Figure 2. You can kind of see what those groups are like. The list shows what schools were the top 10 most similar to PC and PN, and the percent for each of the categories at the top. So it just reminds you of the weight within your packet. But here in Figure 1, we can see we have 3 categories at the top of the table. So we'll use these as we go through the presentation. Above expectations ranges from 1st to 3rd, so that's above most. At expectations, 4th to 6th, so we land in the middle of our similar schools list, or below expectations, 7th through 10th, and that's below most within the groups. So here we start with percent proficient, and we see that PC and PN rank 1st and 2nd, which means they're above expectations in reading and writing within their group, attend similar schools, so we saw some favorable results. Also, I just need to give you an update on the wording that College Board renamed evidence-based reading and writing to reading and writing.
Please excuse the interruption. It is 7:15, and that ends tonight's parent-teacher conferences. Thanks so much, everyone, and have a great night.
High school conferences tonight. So when you hear me say reading and writing, I'm referring to what was formerly known as evidence-based reading and writing, so they made that switch in 2024. And so PC and PN both rank 4th, which means they're at expectations in math. Demographic subgroup data, we still look at that for district data reviews and building data reviews. It's just not up here for presentation purposes, but we are being mindful of that as we work with our teams within our buildings. So high school data within their similar schools groups looking relatively favorable. Looking within KRESA, which is Figure 3 in your packet, we can see where our high schools fall within the county based on the 2024 spring data for SAT. So PC ranked 1st in both reading and writing and math. PN was 3rd in reading and writing and 5th in math as it related to percent proficient on that assessment. We purposely removed the alternative programs from this list in the KRESA group. We can't always obtain that information due to the enrollment size, and also the state does not report some of the really low performing schools. They're not released, so it just would not be reliable data. So we're just looking at traditional high schools for this sake. All right, moving on from percent proficient to percent proficient improvement with similar schools. So this is where we're comparing over 3 prior years, specifically looking at percent proficient, which serves as our trend data. All similar schools are listed in Figure 5 for your reference, so you can see where our schools fell. So that 3 years is 1 year pre-pandemic, the 2019 year, and then 2 years post-pandemic, 2022 and 2023. So that's what makes up the 3-year average. This is a weighted average based off of the number of students who took the test each spring, and that's the same as approach that we took in previous years. So comparing 2024 data to the previous 3-year average, looking at percent proficient, you can see that PC ranks 2nd in both evidence-based reading and writing and math, while PN ranked 8th in both subjects. Again, this is to their similar schools list. No school for PC was in the positive for percent proficient improvement for math, and only one showed improvement in the PN group for math as well. So just to note though, PC was 2nd at a minus 1.7%, but it was within 0.1% of the top school. So they were both actually 1.7, but when Melissa in our office ran the numbers, it came down to 0.1%. So that's how close they were for being ranked number 1 within this category. All right, then we look at percent proficient improvement compared to KRESA schools, and that's in Figure 6. PC remains in the upper group at 3rd in both subjects. PN was lower amongst KRESA schools, 7th in reading and writing and 9th in math. And so for PN, this was not unexpected. We saw a cohort come through, PSAT 9 and 10, the 2 previous years. So, you know, as much as we tried to close some of those gaps, we knew that that was a potential lower performing cohort that was coming through. All right, now we move on to growth on figure 8. So as noted, my school data considers an SGP, again, 70 to 99 being above growth, above average growth, 30 to 69 average growth, and anything below that would be considered below average growth. So for academic growth, the statistical norm for the percent of students with average growth or above average growth is 70%. So therefore, any PPS school with at least 70% of students in these ranges is considered to be at expectation. So that's how we looked at it for this particular portion of the report. So any PPS school with less than 70% was considered to be below expectation. So it's pretty simple. We either got there or we didn't. So essentially, when a student takes the PSAT 9-10, they're assigned a group based on their initial score, their initial performance, and now they're compared to others in that same group a couple years later when they take the SAT, and we've talked about that in the past. That's the gist of an SGP, or a student growth percentile. So we're looking at similar groups of kids from one assessment to the next, and we see how much they grew. So both PC and PN had at least 70% of students with average or above average growth in both subjects, and were at expectations. So that's what we want to see. Prior years' results are also shown on here, and I'm not sure if we've shown that in the past, but you can go back to 2023 and 2022. But just be mindful that the 2022 SGB data, that's based on a pre-pandemic assessment result, so you can kind of see how those numbers are a little off. So I'm suspecting that the initial grouping of students happened probably in spring of 2019, and then we're then again compared to when we first had that compliance again in 2022. So, but we did throw that in there just to kind of give a little historical perspective on SGP at the high school level. All right, so we'll move on to middle school now. Our 8th grade students take the PSAT, and that's on figure 10. And here we see their rankings amongst their similar schools as it relates to percent proficient. You'll see in your packet on figure 11 the specific schools that make up each group. Note that CMS and West Middle School, they ended up in each other's group, and that's because they had very similar economically disadvantaged percentage as well as a similar enrollment. We didn't see that in the high school. Those were two, as you see, those two groups were completely different. Although some schools, I believe, were in the same district, just didn't fall in the same actual high school within their similars list. So looking at the data, West Middle is above expectations in math and at expectations in reading and writing. CMS is at expectations in math but below expectations in reading and writing, again compared to their similar schools list. And North Middle School is below expectations in both subjects, meaning they're lower performing within their group. Looking at our county in figure 12, West Middle and CMS rank at the top of the K-RESA schools in both reading and writing and math. You can see them there in first and second. You can also see that North Middle School is somewhere in the middle towards the top half in both subjects as well. So within the county, we are looking pretty strong as well. Now we move to percent proficient improvement with similar schools on figure 13. So again, we're comparing over 3 prior years, specifically looking at percent proficient, which serves as our trend data. So comparing 2024 data to the previous 3-year average, you can see Central Middle and West Middle were at expectations in math, and all schools were below expectations in reading and writing. And then you could also see where North Middle School landed in reading and writing and math, kind of towards the bottom of their similar schools list. I know the graph isn't great for presentation purposes, but in your packet, you can see these numbers a little better. Compared to K-RESA schools on figure 15, PPS improvement is in the bottom half for reading and writing, but Central Middle and West Middle rank highly in math, 2nd and 4th. So within the county, looking pretty decently for the 2 middle schools. Going on to PSAT 8, our SGPs are based on a previous M-STEP performance. So somehow the state is able to link those 2 assessments, even though they're different. This is determined by the state for all students in Michigan and then collected from my school data. So we're taking directly from that data source. So on figure 16, we see all middle schools had at least 70% of students with average or above average growth in reading and writing, and were at expectations. Central Middle School and West were at expectations in math, while North Middle was below expectations at 64%. So they didn't make that cutoff of 70% of their kids showing that 30 percentile or higher growth. And then prior years are shown again for context so that you can see kind of a trend data as well. So what do we do based off of what we just presented? And where do we go from here, or where do we continue to go? As you know, all of our work falls under the umbrella of a continuous improvement. We focused on our K-12 professional development alignment and long-range planning. Our educators are starting to see how each professional learning opportunity connects with one another and builds on strategies that help improve their practice in the classroom. We're in phase 1 of our math curriculum review cycle, focused on the research, framework, and data review phase. ELA is in phase 3 with full implementation at the middle school level, and we have some early adopters at 9th grade, while 10th grade ELA is working on developing their units and their lessons. The curriculum review cycles are multi-year processes, as you know. We continue to walk through them, which we align state standards to a curriculum framework. That's the gist of our curriculum review cycles. We recently held a meeting with our testing teams. We had principals in the room, our MTSS coordinators, to engage in a training that was put on by the College Board. We had Brad Brunner, which was our rep for our state, to support them with all the tools available to maximize the use of the fall data that we just got back from PSAT 8 and the PSAT NMSQT. So we're intentionally preparing for these assessments to put our students in the best position possible prior to the spring testing cycles. Each building has developed a plan or is developing a plan to address the gaps that we've seen on these fall assessments and connect them to standards within our curriculum in the Tier 1 setting in the classroom. So that was the goal there. It's not teaching to the test, it's seeing where the gaps are within our curriculum based off of the results that we're seeing that's all connected back to standards. We recognize the need to reset our approach to PLCs to ensure our educators have a dedicated time to collaborate both vertically and horizontally. So that means by grade level as well as content area. I see we have Ms. Frink in the audience as well. So we've worked directly with the PEA, which have been some wonderful meetings to really talk about the parameters and how we best fit our PLCs within the contractual bargaining agreement. So we appreciate that partnership that we've had to work through that. We're seeing the impact of our 2 instructional coaches as well. That's helping with the curriculum review cycles, the implementation of the new curriculum, and helping with data reviews. So Laura Cleesby and Colin Newsmer have been essential to our department and supporting particularly the middle schools. And the coaching framework has really shed light on the need to have a similar setup at the high school level to assist with PLCs, the PD alignment, and any curricular needs. So those are just some early discussions we're having about how do we better support the high school. And as you know, this is ongoing work. It's a journey. There's really no end point. And so the focus is at growth each year. Growth in our practice to best prepare our students for their next steps after PPS. So that's, I just dropped a lot of data on you. You have a very thick packet in front of you, but I'm interested in what questions or comments that you may have.
I like the new format.
Do you? Okay, good.
I think it helps us see things differently. And to really be able to better hone in on some different aspects of things. So I really like the new format. Is it what we expected? What we are, you mentioned that already. We knew where there were some areas of weaknesses. We have to know where we are to move forward. So, and y'all are taking the appropriate step to get there.
So I have a question about the growth. So obviously we don't have data from these same students from the previous year. So the growth we're looking at is just this cohort compared to last year's cohort, correct?
The growth is determined by, if we're looking at the student growth percentiles, Terry, that's looking at when they initially took an assessment. So say when they were in 9th grade, they took the PSAT 9.
Okay.
Say you all took that. You were all 9th grade, and you all had different scores. You were put in basically a different cohort, okay? At least as it relates to student growth percentiles. And so you got grouped based off of your initial performance. Well, 2 years later, you take the SAT. And so Terry, your group, which was different than the rest of the board, we see how you did within your group compared to the peers that were also put in that same score band. And how did you fare based off of that peer group?
Okay.
So it actually is looking at the same cohort of kids. Although, you know, we have kids coming into the high school at 10th and 11th grade, we may not have that initial data, but for the majority of students, we have it. So it actually does, I don't want to use the word track, but it helps us get a picture of how much they grew from one assessment to the next.
Okay, that was
compared to
just
their
my
peers.
question, is if this was the same overall group of kids that were in 9th grade, that now at 11th grade, we're comparing them.
Right.
That was my question.
Compared to a group in which they scored similarly to back in 9th grade. And honestly, that's the one that we really pay attention to, because it talks about the impact that we are or not having with our students, and that's really important to us, to make sure that we're making that impact and that they're getting better as they go through our continuum.
And that's what we were looking for, so thank you.
I had a couple thoughts that came to mind as you were talking, and first of all, the graphs are wonderful. As much as my eyes go boggly with lists of numbers, when I look at graphs and can play with things and look at things, it's my element, I know. Weird dichotomy, but I appreciate how you said that you are creating time for teachers to work, to make this happen. That when you went through the next steps and focus areas, that time to work is one thing for teachers to be given things to do, and another to have time to do it.
Yeah, I walked
And
into
that
a
is
really good session on our professional learning day last Friday here at PC. I believe Cheryl Bradford was leading kind of their SAT committee, and she was leading a session. She was at the College Board presentation with that whole team that was in the room. And their next step, based off of Mr. Albertus's, kind of direction and guidance to formulate a plan and how are we gonna permeate this into the classroom level, they were mapping it out, and they had at least the core 4 cores in there with math, science, ELA, and social studies. And they were trying to figure out, all right, how do we utilize the tools that we just learned about? How do we utilize Khan Academy, which is connected to the College Board, so kids could go in and have more of a personalized plan as they prep? So there's some really great things that are going on that are driven by our teacher leaders right now that I really appreciate. So, but it does come down to our leaders making sure that our departments and SAT-type teams have the time and the space. We have the data, but have the time and space to collaborate to figure out, all right, how are we going to implement this plan, and what does that look like for each of our secondary schools in particular?
The other thing that has rung in my brain every time that we have discussed changing the data, and I just wanted to bring it out in a more public session, is that this is data that the teachers use, that you use. This is more applicable data than, and it's one thing to get some interesting little data, but if you're not going to use it, it's really useless. And knowing that as a board, we're seeing that data that you are also using in the classroom while designing plans, and the teachers are able to get to use to set goals, to design, to figure out where your gaps are, what you're doing to improve. To know that that matches, I think is extremely beneficial as a board.
And, obviously we have Melissa O'Keefe in our office who does a phenomenal job to allow someone like me to come up here and somewhat make sense of the numbers. So we really appreciate having her, but, not to duplicate her work or have her run, different sets of numbers for different purposes. Just know it means a lot to us too, that, what you see is what we're gonna hand our building teams, and they're gonna utilize that in their data reviews, both at the building level and anything that we run district-wide. That not only helps Melissa, but it's just nice that we're all aligned. What you're seeing is what our teams are seeing, and we're all kind of in it together to help improve, and it's nice that we've kind of been a little more efficient with our approach to all of this.
It gives us more time to help the students. As you said, efficiency is an excellent word, because it does give us more time to really benefit the ones who need to benefit the most, students.
Oh, anything on your mind?
Yes.
You might have
I was going to hold it back, but Michael, thank you for asking. This is really helpful. And I know you kind of introduced this to us at the spring retreat, and it was kind of mind-blowing that, and it's like, okay, let's wait till we see the first real data, and I think this is incredibly helpful. I think, and I'll just admit, my brain may take a little longer to wrap around this, and so you'll have more next month, right, for elementary, and then the summative in January. So I'm gonna give it that long for my brain to catch up with this. And then I might say we might need to spend a little more time, maybe in a retreat setting, just kind of helping me understand it, because it can get a little complicated.
We'll go through this series of presentations this year, and if it's a retreat in the spring or whatnot, take a step back and say, how did this go? Do we need to make any smaller tweaks moving forward into the upcoming years? I appreciate your guys' openness to looking at that, and know that we're always open to taking a step back too, to see if we can present it in a different way or just tweak little things here and there. So we'll just honor the cycle, and then we'll all come together maybe, in a spring retreat to figure out what it looks like moving forward after this. But again, we appreciate, our partnership and the retreats and the feedback that you all have given to help get us to where we're at right here. Because I do feel like Kimberly said, this is going to be more meaningful, more purposeful for our building teams. And I think hopefully it sheds a little more light in terms of how our individual schools are doing to, they're true comparators within the state. And not only that, within the county too, because I know that's important to everyone.
And I think it was important to do both of those, right? I mean, they're both legitimate, in their own way. Right, and then there's this trade-off between the board setting expectations and then you all talking about what's the response going to be, and kind of that give and take. And I love this. I mean, and as a trustee, I often, think about kind of the back and forth and seeing activity but doesn't necessarily move the needle. But I applaud the activity, but then sometimes there are no quick fixes, and it's a slower process. And as a board, being patient a little bit, although we do want results in some of the areas where we're lagging. So I'm just kind of reflecting as a trustee and trying to balance all of that.
Yeah, I think maybe when we come to the summary presentation in January, maybe we'll bring some highlights. Even today, I was having a great conversation with Courtney Huff and Jessica Wynn-Stanley about the early adopters at the elementary level and the impact that it's having on growth and achievement at certain grade levels, particularly fifth grade, they were showing me. And so maybe we could do a better job of bringing that to all of you to kind of see what some of the impact of what you see up here. And this is a credit to Dr. Sheehan. I had 6 bullets on a slide, and then we had a quick meeting, and she said, let me see what I could do with this. So I have to give credit to her for this sweet graphic that's on this PowerPoint today. But it basically summarized 6 bullet points that I had in a much more aesthetically pleasing slide.
Along those lines, I definitely think it's appropriate, in addition to the black and white colorful charts, to have some brag points. Let's highlight those. Let's celebrate those too.
Absolutely. You guys know there's a lot of wonderful things happening. We have wonderful educators. Our teachers are working hard. Our leaders are working hard. Sometimes we fall short, but there's a lot of times where, we are getting it right. We're seeing the impact that it has on kids, and we just got to do a better job of bringing it in front of all of you to kind of celebrate that as we go. As I said, continuous improvement. It's ongoing. It's about growth. It's never going to end. So as we go through that journey, we got to celebrate, the great things that our educators and our kids are doing.
We also, several of us were at a conference, I guess it was last week, where we met with other schools that are doing continuous improvement work. And one of the things that resonated with us was the need to focus. And, there's a lot of things we need to do, but we have to pick one and do it well. And, I think what you're seeing here is that, this helps us narrow our focus and get very targeted. And once we get some success with that, we'll be able to pick another area to focus on. But it does take time, to your earlier point.
These are the things that are really impactful at the secondary level. And when Dr. Jensinius and I come up in December, there may be 1 or 2 of these bubbles that are a little different, that are more specific to the elementary level that we see as priority. But there also is a lot of overlap K-12, and that's what we've really been working hard at, is having that alignment with a lot of the things that you see up there. So we look forward to coming back in December and then presenting you with a summary in January as well.
My unfair question, which I will pose, but I don't want an answer tonight, but maybe in January, is, Michael and Mark, from all of this, what are your big picture takeaways to help us as a board? You know, we're gonna stay out of the weeds appropriately, but yeah, what are your handfuls of big picture takeaways from the less is more philosophy?
Okay. Got it. I know.
We'll
One
have
of those
something
ladies
for you.
also jotted it down, so we've got it captured, but we'll make sure we bring something for you.
Thank you for the report. Great work. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
The only thing I want to add is, you know, you heard the work around the MTSS, the systems of support that we have in place, and we just got validation of that from the Michigan Multi-Tiered System of Supports Technical Assistance Center that recognized all of our schools in some way or another for data utilization, implementation, and impact that we've had on student achievement. So, you know, we don't just give lip service to the fact that we are an MTSS district, but we are using the data, you know, during the times we have allocated to work on school improvement, continuous improvement work. So kudos to all of the buildings and their leaders and their teams for doing the right thing for kids.
Thank you.
That's it. That concludes the report.
Okay. We'll move to our comments and communications section. I believe we have one individual who wishes to address the board tonight. Welcome, Kat.
You want to read me the rules, or are we okay?
Yeah, that'll take a while.
Hi, everybody. As you heard in the announcements, we had parent-teacher conferences tonight, and I'm tired, so please forgive me if I have trouble reading the words that are on the paper that I brought. And before I start with that, I also want to say thank you to Michael, Kelly, and Mackenzie and Brad for collaborating on some of those PLCs and working within the contract that we have established. So hi, I'm Kat. I'm happy to share a couple of highlights from our staff, speaking of bringing some of the good things before you. Staff and students today. Over the past 2 weekends, our Portage Central talented staff and students put on an incredible production of Hadestown Teen Edition. As the first high school in the state to stage this show, we not only set a high bar for theatrical excellence, but also provided a unique opportunity for our students to shine on stage and also off stage. I want to extend a heartfelt thank you to Director Ashley Bowen and her entire team for their vision and commitment to excellence. They truly brought this production to life, enriching our community and inspiring our students. Personally, my husband was the lighting designer on this, and he came home with his hands just cut up because of those lanterns. If you saw the show, he was making those lanterns from scratch. So incredible work that he and his crew did. Additionally, I'd like to celebrate the Portage Northern Marching Band under the direction of Will Mafara, who is in his first year here at PPS. The band recently achieved an honor at the Rockford Band Competition, earning Best Percussion. So congratulations to Will and all of his students at Portage Northern. I learned today that from some teacher colleagues at Angling Road that their principal, Mrs. Williamson, recently worked with Burlington Coat Factory and Adopt a Classroom to secure a $5,000 donation to their school. We all know how much teachers spend personally on their classrooms and students. So what a blessing for each teacher to have around $200 to now spend on their students from this. So thank you to Mrs. Williamson, Burlington Coat Factory, and Adopt a Classroom. And finally, at Central Middle School, students in 6th grade ELA literacy through project-based learning, taught by Katie Ramsdell and Amy Wendland, completed their quarter-long project of creating a yearbook for a group of senior citizens from Friendship Village. Throughout the first quarter, the students met with the seniors and interviewed them, researched what happened during their lifespan, and then created a yearbook of all of the seniors, which they delivered to them at Friendship Village last week. So thank you to Katie and Amy for organizing and implementing this unique opportunity for our community. They've also gotten a couple notes back from the seniors, so one of the emails that I enjoyed, I put in here for you to read, as well as a couple pictures that I only printed in black and white, sorry. They're there. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for highlighting those things, Kat. Thank you very much. A lot of good work going on and a lot of teachers working hard. Thank you. Any comments by board trustees this evening?
Well, I'm just going to reiterate what Kat said about Hadestown. It was really something. I had not seen that show before, and although I loosely knew what it was based on, I did not know all the details, and it was really, really amazing. So I saw Ashley in the hall on the way in here and had a chance to talk to her for a minute too. Also, Portage Northern is opening Rent on Friday, and that will be running for the next 2 weekends, and I expect that to be an equally good production, so if you have a chance to go, do it.
I also attended Hadestown and was very impressed. Those lanterns were amazing. I did not realize they were created like that. I thought they were purchased. Oh my, makes it even more impressive. And the lighting against the going around, some of the dance numbers, it was fun seeing some of the shorts that I had seen of the Broadway production and seeing it done so well at the high school level. And being able to pick things out and go, oh, I recognize that. That was great. Marching bands, both Central and Northern, amazing shows. Wow. But I wanted to highlight a club at Portage Central called the Superstars. These are a group of students that got together, and you're nodding, you probably know. They got together and created a fall festival for students at Woods Edge Learning Center. And did amazing. There were students that got to do fall activities at all levels of ability, from paraplegics in wheelchairs to everything. I had a dance party going on that just impressed the students, had sensory activities planned out for the students, games for the students, art activity, making t-shirts that the students are now proudly wearing. I am so impressed, not just with the activities, but with the compassion and the fun and respect that the students from Portage Central showed when they just got there and had fun. And kudos to them and to every staff member who helped plan for that. That was incredible to see and watch, and to see them so affirming of all the students and enjoying themselves too. Just getting in and getting dirty and having fun.
Anyone else today? Yes, sir.
Just a couple things. Kat, thanks for your reports, and thanks for taking the time to put together those reports for us. It's appreciated. Then I was trying to count up the number of building visits that the board had been invited on since our last meeting, and I may be off by one or two, but I think Northern, we had Curious Kids, Community High, Central L, and Mooresbridge. It's always great to have a chance to get into those buildings, get a little closer to teachers and staff and students. So those are special, and glad they're taking place.
And you have 2 more this week, one at Woodland and one at Central Middle School, Wednesday and Friday mornings respectively.
I know you've all been waiting for my report from the MASB Annual Leadership Conference. We'll get right to it. The Michigan Association of School Attorneys is always great, and I brought back one of the handouts from that, which is an update on Title IX. Attended the delegate assembly, and worry no more, all the resolutions, amendments, and bylaws were passed with some minor changes to the wording of some of them. And then the nice thing about going is you meet people from other districts around the state, and you always leave saying the same thing: wow, I'm sure glad I'm a trustee in Portage. So that is my report on the MASB Annual Leadership Conference. Anything else? Okay, we'll move to our consent agenda. We have 2 items tonight. The October 14th, 2024 Policy Governance Retreat and Regular Business Meeting Minutes, and the Northern High School trip to Costa Rica. Are there any exceptions to the consent agenda as presented? Hearing none, the consent agenda is approved. And we'll move to the next section of our meeting, which is assurance of district performance. And the first thing is monitoring report 2.2, treatment of staff. There's a motion, please, on page 42.
Yes, President Van Antwerp will make the motion that the Board of Education accept monitoring report 2.2, treatment of staff as a reasonable interpretation and evidence of compliance with policy.
Thank you, Keith. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you.
So hopefully you had a chance to take a look at this, but at a high level, this report really talks about mentors, providing mentors for all of our newer staff members, a section there on staff input, different ways that staff has input to operations, through rounding, through staff surveys. And as far as staff surveys go, we do the employee experience survey annually in the spring of every year. So the survey was changed a couple of years ago, so we don't really have any trend data. We do, however, have 2 years of information there provided that really talks about the top box where people strongly agree, and then our net promoter percentage, which is about how many people really promote Portage Public Schools to their audiences. And so far, there's consistency over the last couple of years in the data that we've been receiving there. There's also a section speaking to the operational policies and the collective bargaining agreements that govern our practices, procedures, and working conditions, and the fact that we are adhering to those, and making sure that procedures are in place for addressing concerns, and we really haven't had any issues of major concern that have come up that we haven't been able to resolve in an amicable sort of way. And then we also have a robust evaluation system for our staff members. So the assurances are there in that report, and those are kind of the key areas that are touched on in that particular report. And I'm happy to answer any questions that come out of this, what's become a rather routine, again, report for the board.
Yeah, my only comment is I wish more of our employees would take the survey.
Yes.
And I know you're working on that.
We are working on that because, the more participation we can have, the more accurate our results. We're not getting information skewed anyway, so we are working on strategies on how we might increase staff participation.
Any other comments on this monitoring report? All those in favor of approving monitoring report 2.2, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The monitoring report is approved. Our next monitoring report is on page 53, and it's monitoring report 2.3, compensation and benefits. Is there a motion, please?
President Van Antwerp, I move that the Board of Education accept monitoring report 2.3, compensation and benefits, as a reasonable interpretation and evidence of compliance with policy.
Thank you.
Second?
Thank you.
This too is an annual report that is given this time of the year, and it addresses certain issues of compensation and benefits. My assurances are in there around my personal compensation that's derived from by board action, and as well as the provisions of the contract. I assure you that no one is guaranteed permanent employment in the district, so that's an assurance. Our compensation is based on the fact that it's regionally competitive. So the data we look at is from the broader Kalamazoo area region, and that our compensation practices and what we end up with is within what other board policies are, and does not create inequitable situations across the district. So there's a little more information than that in the report, and I'm happy to answer any questions if they came up while you were reviewing that.
Any questions for Mark?
Another one of those monitoring reports that are boring but important.
Very. Yes, sir. All those in favor of approving monitoring report 2.3, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion passes, and monitoring report 2.3, compensation and benefits, is approved. Our next monitoring report is 2.5, financial condition and activities, and this is the external piece of it. This is the approval of the audit that was presented this evening. There's a motion on page 61.
Mr. President, I move that the Board of Education accept the 2023-24 financial report, single audit at compliance report, and management letter as presented.
Thank you, Kimberly. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Emily. Any comments, discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion passes, and the the audit report is approved. We have an action item here, and that's to revise our monitoring schedule. And that motion is on page 65, and it's the things we discussed at our last retreat. If there is a motion, please.
There's an updated motion. Oh, that's for the close, sorry. Disregard.
President Van Antwerp, I move that the Board of Education approve the revised monitoring schedule and the addition of the monitoring method and frequency statements on each of the policies 1.0, 2.0, 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, 2.4, 2.5, 2.6, 2.8, 2.9, 2.10, and 2.11 as presented.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion, comments? All those in favor of the revised monitoring schedule, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion passes. The revised monitoring schedule is approved. And I think Barb has new inserts for our policy manuals.
I do.
That we should pick up.
Before you go,
All right.
I'll give one to you.
All right.
And hopefully this captures what the discussion was at our last retreat, that you wanted to see more specifically the month, so that we capture that both in the schedule and on the policy, so that's what this reflects.
Good. We have a discussion item now, the summer tax resolution. Welcome again, Paula.
Good evening, Board of Ed and Superintendent Beeling. Included in your packet was a resolution that we bring to the board each year to pass the resolution at our next board meeting to allow us to collect property taxes from the city of Portage over the summer. This is done for several reasons, cash flow purposes, non-borrowing purposes, et cetera. But I come to you each year with this item. So it's that time of year again. To think about next summer already. Any
Comments? Questions for Paula?
This is just one of those nerdy little things, and the city of Portage does its property tax collection a little differently. We benefit from that. So with our cash flow.
We asked them to include it in the summertime, and it benefits us.
Yeah, for sure.
And then we are receiving property tax revenue over the time frame that we don't receive state aid. So
Yeah.
it just helps.
So this means we don't have to borrow, or many other school districts do have to do borrowing for part of the year for
Our district
cash
did
flow.
have to borrow for a while, yes.
Great.
Thank you, Paula. Our next discussion item involves you as well, the resolution authorizing sale of bonds.
Included in your packet was a resolution authorizing us to move forward with the third issuance on the bond series. So there's a process that we have to go through. We're working with our legal counsel, Miller Campfield. We're working with Baker Tilly, and we're also working with Stiefel through this process. So bringing the resolution to you tonight for discussion, for approval at the next board meeting, allows my office to move forward with the actual bond sale so that we can get the rating from Standard & Poor's, so that we can go through all of that and receive proceeds. We're targeting for early February, so that we can keep continuing on with all of our construction projects.
Well, is this sale for a specific building, or does it flow across the number of projects that we have?
It's going to flow across the projects that we have in place. but then start the next phase. And I will lean to Johnny for that. I'm just the person to make sure that we get the money. And I will defer to Johnny for any specific questions, but we're working towards what our next steps will be in construction.
And would we expect to have another sale to complete Woodland?
So essentially, we have roughly, between bond sale 3 and 4, we have roughly $115 million in bond sales available. So this 43-ish million will kind of cover the remaining portions of Central L and Haverhill and begin the construction portion for Woodland. And we expect to sell the fourth series sometime in 2026.
Anything else for Paul?
Thank you, Johnny.
Thank you. Our next discussion item is boiler.
I'm joined tonight with Anastasia from OAK. You've met her. She's our project manager on our construction side. This boiler at PCEC, we had intended to try to get the project done in the summer of 2024, but our timelines were not conducive. We did not get any bids for summer of 2024. We partnered with OAK to put the project back out for vendors for summer of 2025. So I recommend that the Board of Education approve $503,481 for the replacement of the boiler at PCEC. And as a part of that budget, award a contract for $249,400 to DHE Plumbing and Mechanical LLC. The funding will come from our Building and Site Sinking Fund. Essentially, at PCEC, the boiler that is there was built in 1971. We purchased it in 1991 used. So it has exceeded its useful life cycle. Our goal with our boiler is to have a new boiler system, steam boiler, installed in summer of 2025. There are several trades listed within this bid scope, with DHE Plumbing and Mechanical carrying the largest portion, and that's the only portion of the trade that covers, that exceeds the $100,000 threshold that the board has in place for policy. The other fees that you'll see in the bid categories are for general conditions as well as contingencies and fees associated with our CM and our architectural firm. So I'll be happy to answer any questions that the board would have as it relates to this PCE boiler replacement.
Sounds needed.
Yes. It is past due life cycle.
And it's something else that comes from Building and Site Sinking Fund, so it doesn't have to come from general fund.
That is correct. We're very fortunate. Obviously, our citizens renewed our most recent Building and Site Sinking Fund proposal back in August, and we're fortunate to be able to do these types of projects without impacting our bond dollars or our general fund.
And as you know, we're not going to permanently use that building. That's, that building does have a lifespan, and we hope that if there's an aftermarket desire for these boilers, so that we can sell those after we had a chance to use them for a few years. But in the meantime, we have to keep that building operating while we decide the future of facilities for the programs that are housed there.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move into closed session, and there's a corrected motion that has yellow highlighter on it. Does everyone have that? Is there a motion, please?
Mr. President, I move that the Board of Education move into closed session under Section 8(1)H of the Open Meetings Act, MCL 15.2681H, to consider a letter from its attorneys dated October 31, 2024, the reason that the letter is exempt from disclosure from state law due to the attorney-client privilege.
Second.
Thank you. This is a roll call vote, please.
Mr. Kroll?
Yes.
Mrs. Crawford?
Yes.
Mrs. Navaria?
Yes.
Mr. Van Antwerp?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
Ms. Larson?
Yes.
Okay, the motion to approve going into closed session is approved, and we're going to have to go into closed session here, as I understand it. And we will be coming back after closed session to take action. Thank you very much.